to the AT&T teleconferencing service. Enter your access code. Enter your attendee ID number, followed. Your line has been muted. Press star 6 to unmute your own line.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. I heard a lot of beeps there, so I wasn't quite sure. Okay, let's start, please, with COVID and Matthew.
Good morning, Jeff. So 2 big questions for the coming months driving the 2 big parts to this story are, will Americans be able to drive down the case numbers before it's too late this winter? And will a vaccine pass muster before the end of the fall? There's some new thinking here. Lots of new warnings as well, and we'll probably hear them day after day about a fall and winter surge threat. Fauci last night saying the current 40,000 a day case average is unacceptable. We've got to get it down before we go into the more problematic winter people indoors. Today, we stand at almost 201,000 deaths and 6.9 million cases. Trump calls the death number, quote, a shame, before heading to another PAC rally and another assessment that the U.S. handled everything just fine. Yesterday alone saw almost 40,000 cases and 921 new deaths, and we're used to the numbers, but we don't want to become numb to them, for sure. The big question on vaccines, with the FDA, as we reported, now poised to lay out tougher standards for an emergency authorization, will the administration, which has to approve that, stand in the way, since this could stretch the timeline out past the election? And given all of that, and given all of the recent drama with the CDC and the botched response and Trump's downplaying, we will see Redfield, Hahn, Giroir, Fauci take questions before the Senate Health Committee at 10 o'clock today. There are growing questions on the Hill and everywhere else about the sequence of events that led to that so-called mistake in the new CDC guidance. The vaccine front, the other big part of this story, just in this morning, Johnson & Johnson just announced it's beginning a phase 3 trial. It's the 4th company in the U.S., but it is the first final trial of a single-dose vaccine, which would obviously mean people protected much sooner, trials taking much shorter if it all works with a single dose. The other big story on vaccines, obviously, is that we're learning more about this tougher test that the FDA is considering applying, the math for it pushing a vaccine past Election Day. 3 sources telling CNN about a variety of scenarios. Each of them put that timing for an emergency use authorization out another couple of months at least. One source telling us either way it's going to be Thanksgiving at the earliest. The scenarios include things like a 60-day monitoring period, either for some or for all of the test subjects after the final test doses. And of course, that hasn't even happened yet. Pfizer and Moderna have given second doses to less than half of the participant group, and AstraZeneca is still paused in the U.S. But again, this is not an FDA announcement. This is reporting that they are considering flash drafting, and it is subject to White House and administration approval. So we need to watch this. Don't forget that a few days ago, HHS and AZAR issued an order requiring sign-off on any FDA rule changes, which makes us wonder if that is some kind of setup for this FDA change. All of this, of course, against the backdrop of sinking faith in vaccines, as we've seen in the polls. Some seeing this as an effort to shore up trust and transparency with the FDA. Looking at some of the key trends, on the map, nearly half of the states still on the way up when it comes to new cases. Most of the western half of the U.S. in the red. 22 states up in new cases this week, 21 steady, 7 down. These states are up more than 50% week to week. Wisconsin, Michigan, Colorado, Arizona, Utah, Wyoming, Texas. Colorado drove numbers down from mid-July to mid-August, but then it's had sharp increases from mid-August to now, and Lucy Kavanaugh is available in Denver. We've talked a lot about the Midwest, and here is the latest. Minnesota is back to July peak case levels, and Wisconsin is above July, averaging a record 2,000 cases a day or so. And we've got Ryan Young in Chicago on the Midwest story. On the school part of the story, almost 60,000 cases on U.S. campuses and a major college football program pausing. Notre Dame postponing its upcoming first road game with Wake Forest and suspending all football-related activities. 7 student athletes test positive, a bunch of others in isolation or quarantine. 22 students were barred from campus at Middlebury, which is a school of only about 3,000, over COVID protocol violations. And then on the public school front, Miami-Dade will become the largest district in America for full-time in-person returning after the school board approved a plan yesterday for 350,000 students. New York, of course, is a larger district, but it's only part-time in person. We've got Biana and Evan McMorris-Santoro on education fronts. And then a couple of other health notes, vaccines and children. There are no trials focusing on children right now of vaccine candidates, and a group of pediatric infectious disease docs is saying kids are stuck in neutral on this front, and they're appealing to vaccine makers to make inroads here. It's unclear if they will. The largest manufacturer of vaccines in the world, India's Serum Institute, says vaccinating the whole world could take until 2024. And then, of course, antibody therapies, which we heard a lot about early on. I think some of us expected more news by now. Regeneron tells CNN that it is still on track to see the data this month, which the month is soon ending, of course. And Eli Lilly tells us it is making progress. There are 69 antibody therapies under investigation, but again, none at the finish line as we go into the fall. We have Sanjay and Elizabeth available on the health news. And of course, we have the rap pieces, which today are Nick Watt for 4, 6, and 8, and Erica Hill for 5, 7, and 9. I'll leave it there.
Thank you very much, Matthew. International COVID?
Hi, so I'll just start with Israel today, that they hit a new daily record of cases today. It comes as the government looks at tighter restrictions in their second lockdown. So Oren Lieberman is all across that story this morning. Britain also woke up to their new reality after the address by Johnson last night, who outlined these new measures meant to last 6 months. Nick Robertson has this step-back package looking at all the challenges Boris faces after his landslide victory in December, Brexit deal on the table, and all of the pandemic back and forth. Scott McLean has been up for all the lives. And then we've got also in Europe, Melissa Bell available on the wider France-Spain lines today as Europe just continues to grapple with COVID cases. Paula Newton is going to report from Canada today as Trudeau's government addresses the opening of Parliament in what they call their throne speech, which basically is where their government outlines their main priorities. Their response to COVID is obviously going to dominate all of that. So she'll have that reporting. And then just lastly, Matt Rivers in Latin America, Mexico passing 700,000 cases. Meanwhile, Argentina reported the country's single-day record since the start of the pandemic. So things far from under control there as well. That's where we start on COVID.
Thank you very much. Business?
Jeff, good morning. Sentiment seems to be improving on Wall Street. Investors having some relief yesterday when an agreement to keep the government funded through December 11th was reached, avoiding a shutdown before election. And obviously that Johnson & Johnson announcement this morning that Matthew mentioned certainly helping sentiment. The Dow is up over 200 points. But this morning, it's all about stimulus or lack thereof. With 200,000 people dead, thousands sick, and the economy teetering, Congress still seems to have abandoned COVID relief talks, as Manley has reported. No back and forth deal between the White House, no shuttle negotiations, and mostly a recognition that this probably won't get done. And this is exactly what Powell warned about in his testimony on the Hill yesterday. He's back at it today, testifying before the House subcommittee at 10 o'clock. And obviously, he said the economy has a long way to go before it fully recovers, and more support is needed. Now, that slow growth was echoed this morning by the CBO, which predicted that the U.S. economy is likely to grow more slowly in the coming decades, and the public debt burden will increase more than previously forecast. And of course, we know the president barely mentioned the 200,000 death milestone yesterday, but unsurprisingly, personalities in right-wing media also ignoring it, instead attacking models and suggesting health experts like Dr. Fauci were alarmist. Oliver Darcy is up on that this morning for Reliable, and that's where we begin.
Okay, thank you very much. Washington COVID?
Okay, so yesterday after the 200,000 mark was reached, these just stunning pictures out of the campaign event that the Trump campaign put out last night of just, massive crowds with mostly maskless, and just again showing how the White House is continuing to minimize this as we've crossed this threshold. He said that he called it a shame, but claimed that he had saved millions of lives and blamed it on China yet again. He mocked Biden for wearing a mask and just continued his line of just downplaying this and pretending like it no longer exists, as we hear from what Matthew said with Fauci and this really bad situation we're heading into in the winter. Of course, Matthew mentioned the scientists up there. There will likely be a lot of back and forth on and watching Redfield and how he handles these questions. He always seems to come down on he seems to be coming down on the side of being frank, and so we're expecting more of that today. And then obviously the healthcare angle of it, Pence saying that there would be executive action guaranteeing Americans with pre-existing conditions must be covered. This is to be announced tomorrow in Charlotte by the president. Of course, important to point out that Obamacare already does that. But this is going to be their line as to how to counter the healthcare piece of it all. And I think those are the highlights on COVID.
Okay, let's open it up to thoughts on COVID, please.
Hey, Jeff. Good morning. It's Ben. I just wanted to jump in and say I think we've been doing a really good job on air and online highlighting some really great personal stories of COVID. And that's obviously there is a mother, a father, a child behind every single one of these 200,000 plus deaths. I just want to be really careful that in the stories that we're telling, I think that we're not blowing these younger deaths out of proportion. And just a reminder for everybody on the call, these deaths, while tragic, every single one of them are really, really rare, in younger groups. And just, to put a quick stat on it, people who are 75 to 84, according to the CDC, are 220 times higher than someone in their 20s to die. Someone who's 85 plus is 630 times higher likely to die than someone in their 20s. So I think as we continue to tell these personal stories, those are the outliers, obviously, so they can grab, some bit of attention. But I think, the stories that we can and should put up as more representative would be, kids losing their parents, grandkids losing their grandparents, perhaps people dying who didn't take the virus seriously, went to a rally or some other event like that, and anything around nursing homes. And in fact, I think there's a story in the works on nursing homes, which, as we know, is where a lot of these deaths actually do take place.
Okay. Other thoughts?
Yeah, just to follow up on something Ben said about these rallies and other, outdoor gatherings where we're saying that these are potentially super spreader events. Like, who's tracking that? How do we know if there really is, a lot of spread coming from these events? I mean, there's been several rallies now, other than Herman Cain. I don't recall hearing anything or reading anything about, cases coming out of these events. I remember about that wedding reception, but other than that, I don't know what's happening with these political rallies and everything, and whether there are sort of cases that are spreading.
So real quickly, I would just say, on the wedding, for example, that was the way we found out about that was through contact tracing. And this sort of highlights the fact that we don't know if these rallies are spreading. This highlights the complete failure of contact tracing in this country. Beyond that, I'll just share with everybody, we have tried to partner multiple times with multiple different groups who do, some of the cell phone tracking data. And while they have been very willing to play ball with, the Sturgis rally, for example, all of them so far have declined to help us out with these tracking these political rallies because they don't want to get involved in the back and forth, which is unfortunate, but we'll continue to stay on that.
On your comment about focusing on, not focusing too much on the 20-year-olds and focusing on the 75 to 80-year-olds is more likely. What about the people in their 40s, 50s, and 60s, especially those who are, taking care of younger generations and older generations? What do the numbers look like for those?
The numbers in the 40s, 50s, and 60s are, higher than the 20s for sure, not as high, as you get older. But I think, the point I was trying to make is more of, what we're putting on air and online, even though we're always really good, I think, about caveating that these are rare. I think doing so much of it leads people, who are coming by and tapping to think that this is happening more often. And really what we're hearing over and over from the experts, including Fauci just yesterday, is this is really an age thing and an underlying condition at any age thing. And those are the people who I think are most indicative of the vast majority of these 200,000 plus deaths.
Thanks.
Hey, it's David. Just in relationship to this, the Times had a piece, I think, this morning about the incidence of myocarditis in people who have light symptoms or asymptomatic. And I wonder how deeply we understand that, and how does it relate to, for example, people who had rheumatic fever and then turned into rheumatic heart disease later in life. In terms of saying this, how this impacts young people, I think the answer is we don't know. And we don't know how people affects their lungs or their heart. And I'm just curious where we are in our own reporting on that.
On myocarditis, the latest that we put out on that was last week. The American Academy of Pediatrics recommending that any student athletes, would need to get MRIs before going back in the game. That research is sort of young, even compared to everything else that's going on right now. We've mostly been looking at that through the lens of sports, and definitely something we continue to pursue just as we learn about all the different ways this impacts the body that we wouldn't necessarily have thought of. But most of the myocarditis reporting and studies have been revolved around sports.
I just want to add, in terms of how it affects young people and saying it affects virtually nobody, obviously it doesn't reach young people in the same way as older people in terms of serious illness and death, and there's nothing more devastating than that. I understand that. But the fact is, if you're talking about it affecting young people, yes, they may not get that sick if they get it, but their lives have been turned upside down. The kids in college are dealing with all kinds of obstacles, many of them online. They're not able to, have the college experience that many of us had and everyone else had, except for the people that are dealing with this pandemic. Notre Dame had to cancel its football game this weekend. Kids who are in high school and middle school and elementary school are struggling to learn online and dealing with, lack of social interaction and all this stuff. So when we talk about it affects virtually nobody, yes, they don't get sick and die nearly at the rate that older people do. And most of them just have minor symptoms and move on when they do get sick. But in terms of it affecting them, it hasn't affected any group more. Again, I understand the devastation of someone dying, that's more significant in that situation. But in terms of affecting a group more, I don't think any group has been more affected than school age, middle school, high school, and college kids by this pandemic. It's absolutely turned their worlds upside down. They're struggling to get through what they need to get through. And I think we have to look at it in that context as well. So when you say it virtually affects nobody, it actually affects all of them in a significant way.
Michael, this is Cynthia. I have a daughter at Tulane University currently going through COVID. She and her roommates got sick. My daughter, who is an A positive, is very sick. She has gotten an autoimmune response that has created psoriasis all over her legs. And that's one of the conditions. You get these horrible rashes. My daughter has that. She's had horrible symptoms. It not only affects her and all of her roommates. They're in quarantine. They've been moved out of the dorms. But it affects the parents. I haven't slept in a week. So when I hear that this does not affect people, I am beside myself. And this is the second of the 6 children in my family. My other stepdaughter had it, and she had horrible symptoms. So even though we expect them fully to survive, we don't know what's going to be the future, what effect it's going to have long term. We don't know if this psoriasis that has developed in her legs is going to stay for the rest of her life with her. So, this, as a parent and as a person going through this with my family members, it's beyond the kind of commentary for somebody like to hear that.
Yeah, Cynthia, I'm not saying in any way, shape, or form that it doesn't affect some people severely, and I'm so sorry for your daughter, and I hope she gets better quickly. My point is that does happen, even though it's rarer than it is in older people, and I'm really sorry that you're being affected by that, and I hope she gets better soon and her roommates are okay. But what I'm saying is, even if they just get sick a little bit, or even if they're not sick at all, but just their lives are literally turned upside down.
Absolutely.
So,
agree.
And as you said, their families' lives as well. And certainly for people who have school-age children and are trying to teach their children and also do their jobs and manage their lives, it's just a devastating impact. So the phrase "it affects virtually nobody" doesn't just talk about severe illness. I mean, it greatly impacts a huge portion of the population and young people in the same, at an extraordinary level, even though if it's not dying from it.
Any other thoughts?
To continue piling on, I would just point out that babies in strollers get hit by stray bullets at a much lower rate than teenagers and adults, yet we find that to be a senseless tragedy and cover it all the time when it happens. And the same thing is true here. We cover that 28-year-old doctor's family because it's an unnecessary and tragic death of a person who did not have to die. The same is true for tens of thousands of elderly Americans, grandparents and parents who died when they didn't have to die. That's the bigger point of the story, not how rare it is in children or how prevalent it is in the old, which, by the way, I mean, they're not useless people and it's okay that they pass away. I just think that's what people are trying to get across when they cover those stories.
Okay. Anyone else? Matthew.
Okay, turning to the Breonna Taylor case, Louisville is quite a sight to see this morning, bracing for reaction and fallout in a very big way from a grand jury decision that could come at any time. No announcement scheduled yet. We're getting lots of guidance, whispers that today is the day based on movements of key players, et cetera, not reportable. We think we'll get a couple of hours notice, but I wouldn't count on it. We'll be ready for anything. Businesses boarded up downtown, roads blocked, the mayor issuing executive orders, a state of emergency, curfews possible, streets closed. Police say they will not use tear gas without special approval on protesters, part of the new police reforms coming out of this. There's obviously the reporting also about the officer who led that raid that night, John Mattingly, sending this mass email to the police department, defending the officers in sharp language and calling protesters thugs. And there's obviously a lot of attention outside of Louisville, and Illinois just put the National Guard there in a state of readiness for possible reaction there. And again, we're awaiting word from the Kentucky Attorney General as to whether the three officers will be charged from that night. We've got Shimon Prokupecz, Jason Carroll, Mark Morales on the ground in Louisville, and we'll send more if we get there. There's a lot going on with the LA Sheriff's Department. First, obviously, the deputies ambushed. They're now out of the hospital. No word yet on the manhunt in the middle of its second week for who did it. There is also more fallout from one of the recent controversial deputy fatal shootings that sort of fueled the tensions around this as well. That is the shooting death of black cyclist Dejan Kizzy. His family announced results of a private autopsy last night. He was shot 15 times, they say, and the family and attorneys disputed the sheriff's assertion that he pointed a gun at deputies. And then unrelated, of course, other than it involves the sheriff's department, Vanessa Bryant, Kobe's widow, suing the sheriff's department for the photo leak of the helicopter crash that killed her husband and 7 others. So just a lot of things going on with the LA Sheriff's Department, Stephanie Elam in Los Angeles. And then just 2 things that we're checking and working on as it relates to Kenosha. A federal civil rights suit just filed against Kyle Rittenhouse and the Kenosha Guard group over the shooting amid protests and what was said and posted beforehand. We're going through that. And there's also this highly edited, highly pointed video released by this group connected to Rittenhouse's defense that telegraphs the defense strategy, this counter narrative that he was an innocent good Samaritan and that he was surrounded and attacked. Fox obviously ran huge with this last night. So we're examining this closely. And that is it.
Okay. Thank you very much. International.
Hey, Jeff. Yeah, so the other story we've got going on is the Russian opposition leader being discharged from the hospital after his poisoning. He said in a social post he's facing a big rehab period. And then Peskov also reacted this morning about wishing him a speedy recovery and he's welcome back to Moscow. So Matthew Chance has all of that. Nick also has great intel about the poison used, which looks to be a modern day version of a nerve agent we've seen before. So that alert is being prepared and should be out pretty soon. It'll give us a good fresh line today. On the UNGA front, one of the highlights is Maduro's Venezuela will speak, amongst others. So our international reporters will react as news merits to those. Worth noting that China also hit back overnight against Trump's UNGA speech, claiming just coming back with some sharp statements of their own. So Will Ripley had that reporting this morning. And then just lastly, Harry and Meghan condemning hate speech during a brief video message during this Time magazine event. They also weighed in on the U.S. election as the most important of our lifetime. So Anna Stewart has been up live on that, and that's where we start.
Thank you very much. Business.
Hi there. So early this morning, the Trump campaign posted an 8-second video on Facebook that dishonestly snipped a Biden quote to make it look as if he was confused about the Pledge of Allegiance. The clip was tweeted by the RNC National Committee, generating over 13,000 tweets and 1 million views. As both Daniel Dale and Donnie O'Sullivan told me, this is now a pattern of the Trump campaign using these false videos. Facebook, of course, has yet to flag or remove the video. Donnie and Daniel both up on that. And Donnie's also tracking the Facebook announcement that it shut down more than 150 fake accounts run from China that included multiple postings about the November election. And I will leave it there.
I'll say it again. Our failure to call out Facebook and these others for doing this or for not taking any action makes us complicit too. Washington.
Okay, so as you're seeing right now, these incredible pictures out of the court of the RBG clerks lining the steps, her casket going to the court today, some 100 clerks, and Trump announcing this morning he will go up on Thursday to pay his respects. And from 11 today until 10 tonight, this will be open to the public. In terms of what comes next, the president announcing yesterday, 5 o'clock Saturday announcement, all indications are that it will be Barrett, that the one thing we're waiting for officially is the time frame here, but it certainly seems like McConnell and Lindsey Graham are headed for a confirmation of a nominee prior to the election. On voting, there's a bunch of stuff going on today. Chad Wolf is up before the Hill on a confirmation hearing today. This is obviously coming as a whistleblower alleges that he stifled Russian reports in his own agency, so we're likely to hear more of that today. There's an FBI bulletin that went out this morning that warning that foreign actors may exploit the problems in delayed election results. So another concern from the Trump's own administration about this. And then not unrelated, and I'm just mentioning Senate Republicans are issuing this partisan report this morning attacking Biden's son Hunter over his role in Ukraine. It says little about the former VP's role other than what was already known. And this is right before the debate. And then just in a sign of how important this Supreme Court nominee is going to be, this Pennsylvania Supreme Court ruling about absentee ballots has now been appealed to the Supreme Court. Also to note on the whole loyalty front, breaking this morning, former top national security official Ellen Wright is accusing the White House and Justice Department of trying to stop the Golden Book to satisfy Trump and potentially circumventing normal channels on Intel. We have that ruling and Vivian's available. And then Caitlin and Axios reporting that these White House liaisons are being removed from their roles as reporting into the agencies and instead will be replaced with officials who will report directly into the White House. This in an email from Meadows. And these changes will be implemented by McAtee, who has been, since he has come in, the one who is looking throughout the administration for people who are loyal to this president. And I think that's what I got.
Okay. Let's do politics next, please, David.
Sure. Good morning, Jeff. I'll just start with Cindy McCain out this morning with her endorsement of Joe Biden, doing some morning show interviews where she clearly made this all about the character of the two men running. She clearly, the Jeffrey Goldberg Atlantic story and the disparaging comments that Trump has reportedly made about the military and service members sort of motivated her to move to this endorsement position for Biden. She talks about his Biden's integrity and character and his empathy and his ability to have your back, all in contrast to what she says she's observed over the last many years of what's been happening with presidential leadership in the country. Obviously, I don't think Cindy McCain's endorsement is going to somehow upend this election in any way, but like we saw during the DNC, it's yet another high-profile Republican to get out there and tout Biden's credentials, opposing her own party's incumbent, and allowing sort of a permission structure for some Republican voters out there who may not be comfortable or accustomed to casting a vote for a Democratic presidential nominee, sort of saying, look, it's okay. And clearly, Arizona, a major battleground state, where she is most well known, and the sort of suburban woman appeal that she was making directly today is what she hopes to continue to make. So not just an endorsement, but planning on campaigning. But, it's just, to me, an example of the topsy-turvy politics in the era of Trump, that somebody who was running to be the next first lady just 12 years ago, with her husband, with the entire Republican Party machinery behind that effort, endorsing the Democratic nominee for president. Joe Biden, for his part today, is headed to North Carolina for his first trip to the Tar Heel state for the general election, obviously a critical battleground state. And for his chances at trying to flip that state, the African-American vote there is critical. Obviously, it's critical part of his national coalition as well. But that is where he is focused today, wooing African-American voters. He did the Steve Harvey radio show this morning. He's doing African-American business event later today. Jessica Dean will be there with him in North Carolina. Trump, Pence, Harris, all back in D.C. today doing their day jobs. You see a couple battleground state polls out from ABC News, Washington Post this morning in Florida and Arizona, across the Sun Belt there. Some of the best numbers Trump has seen in battleground state polls in quite some time, and yet it's still both margin of error races. No clear leader in either poll, but you see in these numbers, and we'll look for other polls to see if they match them in the days ahead. But an improvement with seniors, and you see the economy as a strength, where coronavirus is a weakness. The economy keeps, in these polls, to be a strong counterpoint to that for voters in Florida and Arizona. We'll have a third sort of Sun Belt battleground state poll out this afternoon, later this morning, from Monmouth University at 11 a.m. in Georgia, showing also a margin of error, basically tied race there as well. And later today at 4 o'clock Eastern, CNN will put out a quick poll that we did, just a few questions to get the pulse of the American people in the aftermath of Ginsburg's death, in terms of who they think should be making this nomination to be her successor, what they think of Trump's handling and direct in the way the court has sort of moved, if they feel that has been a positive or negative development, and whether or not a Supreme Court nominee should be subject to a 60-vote threshold in the Senate or a simple majority of 51. So I don't have the results yet, but we'll get them later this morning and turn that around for 4 o'clock this afternoon. And I think that's where we start, Jeff.
Thank you very much, David. Okay, let's open it up for thoughts on anything. By the way, I just wanted to note that when Trump goes to pay his respects to Ruth Bader Ginsburg tomorrow, it's worth noting that he did not go to pay his respects to John Lewis, by the way, just as an FYI. Okay, let's open it up. Anyone across any of these stories?
Hey, it's Rebecca. I just wanted to point out, as we get to know Amy Coney Barrett and look towards a potential nomination, I think it's really interesting. She seems to be the first potential justice who's the mother of young children. And that's just a big differentiator because of age and gender. And I think it's a part of her story that might have a very interesting appeal. She has 7 kids. A few of them have been adopted. It's just a really compelling part of her narrative that I think is worth talking about more deeply.
Very good note. 2 of them, I believe, adopted from Haiti. But very good note, Rebecca. Thank you. Other thoughts?
Hi, Earl Nurse here from International. I just wanted to know if news does come out on the Breonna Taylor situation, a lot of focus are going to be put on the cops as should be. I just hope in our coverage we don't forget that they really should have never been there. They were given a warrant based on information that turned out not to be correct. So I just hope we also continue to look at the bigger picture, the judge and just the whole system of getting the no knock warrant, which has been changed now.
Really helpful note. Thank you.
And Jeff, it's Matthew. That's a great point. And I should have mentioned that Drew Griffin is also available to play in. He's done a lot of reporting on the wider issues of what led up to the raid and the questions about all that. Really good stuff. That's a great point.
Yeah, very helpful.
Jeff, it's Liza. I just want to say this is really not for probably today, but for long term, a story on the number of Catholics on the Supreme Court, which we've talked about before. I guess 5, and now she makes 6 if she gets on, Amy Coney Barrett. And many of them seem to practice a particular brand of Catholicism, if not all of them, except for Sonia Sotomayor. Sort of evangelical Catholicism that is bizarre and interesting. It just seems like a good long-term story to me.
I think people are highlighting this a lot of different aspects to examine if and when she's nominated.
So Jeff, it's David. To that end, I think a related story is the rise of conservative Catholics supplanting conservative evangelicals on the right, particularly under Trump. When you look at his administration as Attorney General, as Secretary of State, Deputy Chief of Staff, a spokesperson, Supreme Court nominees, and it's as though a vacuum was created with the passing of a generation. But I think that's also an interesting dynamic. It's worth looking at.
So, so obviously a lot of people are raising this, and clearly there's something to it. So I do think Meredith and Rachel and Virginia, we need to make sure we figure out how to get at that. Obviously, we can't. Obviously, religion is a very personal thing, and so we got to be, mindful and respectful of that. But clearly, a lot of people are raising this as a interesting development, and so I do think we should figure out how to get at that.
Okay. And one more thing I just want to add. Trump just announced he's having he says press conference, but at 6 o'clock on today.
Yeah. Hey, Jeff, David mentioned the Attorney General reminded me that I wanted to bring up that the Justice Department is blocking witnesses from testifying before Congress now because they said the Attorney General was not treated nicely when he was there. So just, again, more blocking of information, witnesses, suppression of information, obstruction of information, et cetera. Just an ongoing thing that we should really stay on top of and be talking about regularly, since it happens almost every day. And these are very important issues. And, the Senate is about to have confirmation hearings for Chad Wolf, who's somebody who's been suppressing information. So it fits right in with what's going on, and it's really important.
Hey, Jeff, I just wanted to point. Sorry.
No, go ahead. No, go ahead.
I just wanted to point out on the Catholic story, there is a big divide in the U.S. between the fundamental Catholics in the American church and a very liberal pope. And there are some interesting voices that can talk about what's going on in the U.S. Catholic Church. And one of them is the Cardinal Tobin from New Jersey, who endorsed Biden, by the way. But I think, and talking about the values and the fact that there's really there's no party that actually coincides with their moral structure. However, in having to choose between two, he recommends choosing Biden. So I think there are voices that can talk to what's happened to the American Catholic Church, and this Amy is a perfect example of where that extremism has gone. So I think that there's an interesting story there that could be dealt with unique voices that could frame it so that we're not offending anyone. But I think that there is a story there.
Okay, so look, let me deal with this, and then I want to come back to Michael's point. So look, there's obviously a lot of sentiment around looking at the role of Catholicism in the Supreme Court and in this potential nominee and in government. So I'm all for covering that and going at it in a big way. I want to make sure we do it right. We're respectful. I want to get Daniel Burke involved here. And I think we should rely on David Vigilante's guidance as well. I just want to make sure we handle this right. But I actually think it's really interesting. I think it's worth talking about on television as well. Let's make sure we're doing this right. Clearly, there's a lot of sentiment around it. Back to Michael's point about the suppression of witnesses and information. I continue to think that's a really important story, and and things like that. Okay, so. Okay, let's just make sure we mute if we can. Thank you. Okay, let's move to digital, please.
Hey, Jeff, I hear you 100% on the religion angle. We do have a piece that we are being very careful and thoughtful about from Daniel Burke on People of Praise, that Barrett group. So that is specifically in the works. But the larger point that you and Liza and Vigilante and others are making on just really, and Cynthia just zooming out on religion in the court and Catholicism and the many flavors of, yes, 100%. 29 million uniques yesterday. That was led by Romney's SCOTUS vote decision and that counter-programming story I mentioned about the village in Wales that had its broadband go out every day at the same time. The top video was Jim Acosta with McEnany in that moment. This morning, it is Ariane DeVoe in our number one spot with 12,000 concurrents, the RBG clerks standing guard at the court. It's just a wonderful piece with lots of color and detail on RBG. And these images, the ones where they are all outside on the steps are just really striking and somber. So we're going to do a gallery on that. We have a DLE up. We're going to put those images in there as well and just capture all the moments as people pay their respects. And then we have the note that she will make history on Friday as the first woman in history to lie in state at the U.S. Capitol. And yes, copy also your point on Trump appearing for that, but not John Lewis. Okay, so that's number one right now. In the top five is the teen accused of the murder of Tessa Majors allegedly confessing to his dad on a recorded line. Then it is a standalone video from Don's show last night. Hear what this Trump supporter told his daughter before dying. And that is our overall number one video this morning. And then the Democrats weighing how to handle Trump's potential SCOTUS pick. That's from Manu. And then lastly, Hurricane Paulette is back from the dead as what is now called a zombie tropical storm. So that is a new 2020 term. A handful of other good things. Yes, to the point, I think that was Errol on Breonna Taylor. We have the people at the center of the case. These are kind of concise but very colorful mini profiles from Nicole Chavez. We definitely have the story on the mass email that Matthew mentioned from the Louisville police officer to the department, and a story on the students at the University of Louisville looking at the systems that led to Taylor's death with a 14-week class called Breonna Taylor's Life and Race, Equity, and Law. So yes, and definitely we'll stay on her and her life as that decision comes down. Okay, a couple other good headlines. 1 in 3 families with kids is experiencing food insecurity during the pandemic. This is double the rate since 2018 and higher than at the peak of the Great Recession. Over in politics, we've got some very good analysis up and coming. Why Florida will be so pivotal again. This is Harry Inton, and more coming on Florida, as we've talked about. We have a good analysis from Gloria Borger that just published in the last 20 minutes. Trump and McConnell's marriage of convenience is seeking its ultimate prize. And just so everyone knows, Joan has a piece in the works on RBG's final day. So below that probably will land tomorrow. And just so everyone knows, off of Citizen yesterday, we have a lot of good separates up from key moments of Citizen. You know, there were some really newsworthy, buzzy moments. Fiona Hill on the U.S. being an object of pity, plus the Fauci and Woodward comments. So it's great that we have all of that from our own event yesterday. There's a pair of good pieces at the intersection of the economy and the election from Matt Egan that are up right now. The first one is bankers are backing Biden, not Trump, to win. Biden has raked in $76 million in campaign donations from the finance, insurance, real estate sector, which is well above the $46 million funneled to Trump. The second piece has the headline, "The stock market loves Democratic president." Trump has warned that markets will implode if he loses, but the S&P 500 has averaged stronger returns under Democratic presidents. There's obviously no guarantee that that would happen in a Biden administration, but it definitely shows once again that Trump's arguments are not at all grounded in reality. So 2 very strong Matt Egan pieces for business. There's another great analysis. We're a very analysis day today. Oren Lieberman on Israel's winning on the world stage, but losing the plot at home. He writes about how the country is punching above its weight on the world stage as an innovative startup nation, but at home, Netanyahu is being attacked from the left and the right for his handling of the virus, the economy, criminal trials, and more. We have a great analysis from James Griffiths in Hong Kong on the UNGA. The contrast couldn't be greater between Trump and Xi, but the Chinese leader is the true authoritarian. It's just really good context and history and dot connecting. That's it. I'll stop there.
Okay. Thank you. John?
Good morning. So as you can see, we're on the memorial pictures at the Supreme Court for Justice Ginsburg. Chief Justice Roberts is about to make some state comments, and then this part of the ceremony wraps up. At 11 a.m., they do move her casket out to the portico, where the thousands who are lining up can pay their respects. We'll continue to touch these incredible pictures, Jessica Schneider and Ariane DeVogue, adding to the coverage. Next hour is a key hearing in front of the Senate Health Committee. Fauci, Redfield, Hahn, and Fedor are all going to testify. When we hear about Fauci about the rising cases, the fall concerns, Redfield expect to get a lot of questions about the politics at the CDC and the undermining of that agency, and then Hahn on the FDA considering all these measures to push the vaccine beyond Election Day to make sure that the efficacy is there. It's 23 senators, 5 minutes of questioning each. All the witnesses are in person, so we'll go in for the opening statements of the witnesses and see how long we stick with that. Sanjay Gupta, Dr. Ashish Jha, Michael Mina, and Dr. Leana Wen on all the news that's made from the hearing. Elizabeth Cohen on the Johnson & Johnson vaccine news. We do have vaccine expert Paul Offit joining us this afternoon. He's also has a lot to say about that kids and vaccine angle that Matthew mentioned. And Brianna is getting one of the Johnson & Johnson doctors who's part of that trial that just went to phase 3. John King has Dr. Howard Koh, used to be an assistant HHS secretary. during the H1N1 flu pandemic, and we're really going to drill down about the erosion of public trust of the public health agencies that we're seeing play out in real time right now. International whips, Israel, and the UK storyline front and center. On election security, we have the FBI warning, the New York Times reporting this morning also on the Russian trolls using Trump tweets. We'll watch and see what the Chad Wolf testimony, which also begins next hour. Alex Markart's covering that. Shudo just did an interview with General McMaster. And this afternoon, we're getting Senator Ron Wyden up from the Intel Committee. And finally, Breonna Taylor, obviously, Shimon, on the rising tensions in Louisville as we wait for that decision to be announced. And once it does, which could happen by this afternoon, we'll go all in. Police and legal voices lined up to land on that.
Thank you, John. Washington?
Morning. At 4 o'clock, Cindy McCain joins Jake. We'll do a couple blocks with her. She rolls out her Biden announcement today. In terms of coronavirus, Nick Watt has our COVID wrap piece, and we'll do Johnson & Johnson, and of course, much more, all the headlines, and Sanjay to break it down for us. Caitlin, from the White House, we'll watch Trump's events today, and as David mentioned, we've got this new CNN polling, and Senator Chris Murphy is also booked for us, and we'll get in pictures of RBG lying in repose, and of course, we'll watch and be ready for Breonna Taylor grand jury decision as well.
And in the Situation Room, we'll obviously be watching Fauci, Redfield, Giroir on the Hill, see what comes out of that hearing. This is Fauci says the 40,000 case day number must go down and the warnings about fall. We'll follow on the FDA standards for emergency authorization of a vaccine and look to see what else we learn about the Johnson & Johnson news on this single-dose trial. We'll stay across the trends across the country with nearly half the states up, and we'll follow all of these growing 60,000 case and more number across college campuses. We'll have Sanjay and our doctors, as well as the Nick Watt and Erica Hill rap pieces, and we'll also hit our international whips, looking at the surges in Israel and across Europe. Out of the White House, we'll see how Trump responds to his top medical experts on the Hill today. We'll obviously be watching the 6 o'clock briefing, and we'll see what else we learn on the court side of things about Trump's pick and this 5 o'clock Saturday announcement. Obviously, we'll be looking at these powerful pictures of Ginsburg lying in repose through the day at the court. And we'll keep an eye on the 4 o'clock poll that David mentioned. We'll watch Chad Wolf on the Hill and follow on these election warnings. And obviously, we'll be ready for the Louisville announcement whenever that happens, and we'll be ready to react to that.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody else have anything they want to bring up? Any final thoughts? Have a good day, everybody. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.